800, Feng Shuatao asked, why did you bring me here? The great cultivators at the peak of Hao Ran Mountain had to follow many rules if they wanted to ascend. First, they needed the permission of the Confucian temple, and then the Confucian sage in the sky screen to open the door for them. Otherwise, they would get lost easily and end up in all kinds of strange beyond heaven's secret realms. Moreover, the process of cultivators ascending and traveling was extremely dangerous as well. They had to come into contact with the long river of time that was formed from the Grand Tao, and the slightest carelessness would cause their cultivation to be greatly depleted and their lifespan to be reduced. Therefore, this time, Feng Shuatao traveled the Great Wall of Sword Qi, hand in hand with Alliance. With Alliance opening the way, Feng Shuatao walked very easily. As for why Alliance did not go through the gate of the inverted hanging mountain and came to the wilderness, Feng Shuatao was too lazy to ask. He just took it as this guy showing off his sword skills. Alliance said, "You're not the same as that Qinggong Tai Bao." Feng Shuatao sneered, "Not the same. Didn't I get hit by his sword?" Alliance laughed, "You're quite hot-tempered, aren't you?" Nan Guangzhou, Jing Hao, Feng Shuatao. The three ascendants' Taoist names were Tianxiu, Qinggong Tai Bao, and Qingmi. Each one was more arrogant than the other. "I'm not." When Alliance thought of this, he felt a little sad. This Feng Shuatao beneath his feet had a personal grudge with the old sword immortal of the Central Plains, Zhou Shenji. Feng Shuatao had been born as a mountain cultivator. His Dao name was Qingmi, and it was not for nothing. Naturally, he would not be stingy with his shady dealings. There were definitely plenty of shady dealings that were unethical. Jing Hao, on the other hand, was the most authentic library master. He was born on the mountain and was a natural cultivator. His cultivation in this life was very smooth. Back then, the demons of the wilderness crushed the mountains and rivers of the Jinjia continent and crossed the sea to the southern end of the Liuxia continent. Jing Hao was in the ancestral hall for a meeting. At the beginning, at least half of the cultivators of the Dragon Gate realm and above would go down the mountain and rush to the south to fight to the death. Some of them were old and had no hope of breaking through to the next realm. There were also many cultivators whose family and friends had died in the drifting Dawn continent. Thus, they came out of the mountains to kill demons, both for the greater good and to avenge their personal grudges. However, this great sect that was second to none in the flowing Dawn continent had unexpectedly chosen to seal itself off from the outside world. Not to mention the constant criticism from the outside world, even the sect itself was puzzled. It was said that the sect master, who was going to personally lead the team down the mountain, suddenly changed his mind at the end of the meeting at the ancestral hall. This was because he had received secret instructions from the old ancestor, Jing Hao, to preserve his strength. It would not be too late to wait until the army of the demon race advanced to the north and fought their way to the gates of their own mountains. They could take advantage of the geographical advantage and learn from Fuyao Continent's Heavenly Rumble Village and Tongyi Continent's Lotus Flower City. They could defend their mountains to the death and do things more steadily. They could also contribute to their hometowns. If the drifting Dawn continent lost, they would strive to protect themselves. If the world won, then the vast southern territory of the continent would be cleared of all the immortals on the mountains. It would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the sect to expand their territory and gather vassals. As for how the outside world learned of this rumor, it was because that sect master immediately lost his position as sect master after the ancestral master came out of seclusion and was punished. Nominally, he was a hindrance to the war effort. As a sect master, he was irresponsible and ashamed of his ancestors who were hung on the statues. He had to face the wall and reflect on his mistakes for 100 years. Feng Shuatao asked, "Can you come down and talk?" In the ruins of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, apart from a Confucian temple accompanying a sage, there were also several great cultivators from various continents who were stationed here. They were all watching the show. Alliance complained, if you tell me to come down, I'll come down. Do you think I don't have any face? You're just stupid. If you told me not to come down, do you think I wouldn't come down? Feng Shuatao could only pick up his identity as a rogue cultivator. Anyway, I'm a rogue cultivator. What face do I need? Alliance did not embarrass Feng Shuatao too much. He floated to the ground and sat on the edge of the wall. He tapped the wall with his heel and took out a pot of wine. Feng Shuatao hesitated for a moment. He squatted down and looked towards the south. He asked, that's the old blind man's Sherwan Mountains? Alliance nodded. It's considered my territory. I often go there to drink and eat meat. Back then, the old blind man took 18 of my swords. He admired my swordsmanship very much. He said that if I wasn't young and handsome, he would have mistaken me for Qin Qing. He would have used all his strength to attack. Feng Shuatao's words went in one ear and out the other. He just said to himself, Alliance, why did you stop me from using my swords? At most, I'll just stand still and take a hit. At most, I'll drop my realm. Alliance said, in my impression, rogue cultivators like you are very good at calculating. If you want to drop your realm, go to the south. What's going on in the vast world? Your reputation is not good. Feng Shuatao asked, that's why I don't understand why you want to help me. Alliance said, do you remember the 16th year of the autumn hunt of a certain dynasty in the Central Plains? That dynasty ordered a few vassals, joined forces with a few big neighboring countries, all the immortal masters of the archives, and the gods of the mountains and rivers to hold a great hunt and kill demons and ghosts. Feng Shuatao was expressionless. I don't remember. Alliance said, I remember that there was a rogue cultivator who was passing by. He fought and beat up 2 immortals. Those immortal masters of the archives were very embarrassed. Feng Shuatao was puzzled. Why mention such a small matter? He just couldn't stand the way those immortal masters of the archives acted. They were young, but all of them were old and cunning. They were good at currying favor. Alliance drank his wine and said casually, if the immortal sects where cultivators gather only moved the government from the foot of the mountain to the top of the mountain, I think it's very boring. Feng Shuatao just squatted and felt bored. Alliance turned his head. Can you have the courage to prove that the Confucian temple misjudged you and attacked the wrong person? Feng Shuatao sneered. Forget it. To be honest, I don't think I'm wrong, but I don't think they're wrong either. Alliance rubbed his chin and sighed. There's no rogue cultivator in the upper 5 realms in the world. Feng Shuatao felt a little sad. If this son of AB*TCH was willing to talk seriously, he wouldn't be as bad as the rumors said. Alliance asked, do you have any sword cultivator friends in your life? Feng Shuatao shook his head. I have many fair-weather friends. I don't have any close friends. To be precise, he didn't have any friends. A long time ago, he had one. Alliance stood up and laughed. Then I'll have to congratulate you. Feng Shuatao knew something was wrong. As expected, Alliance said seriously, as long as you accompany me through the boorish land, you'll have a sword cultivator friend. Feng Shuatao smiled bitterly. Do I have no choice? Through the boorish land. Feng Shuatao wasn't an idiot. Alliance said earnestly, don't worry. I can protect an ascendant realm cultivator. Feng Shuatao sighed and began to think of a way to escape. However, when he thought about the boorish land, he felt that the son of AB*TCH beside him was much more familiar with it than he was. How could he escape? The man threw away the empty wine bottle and held his forehead with his hands. Invincible boorish land cultivator, sword cultivator Alliance. He didn't want to wait for Sister Lu Ji. He wanted to leave her with a handsome and majestic back. Feng Shuatao sorted out the messy emotions in his heart and sighed. He raised his eyebrows and looked to the south. After a moment of silence, he smiled and imitated Alliance's way of speaking. He muttered to himself, "Wild cultivator Qingmi, Feng Shuatao of the snowy mountain continent." In the Parrot continent, after visiting 99 rooms, Chen Pingan didn't return with a full load, but he gained a lot. Chen Pingan asked Lu Qiqing if he could help find a place to stay on the island. He planned to cook a meal for everyone. Lu Qiqing said of course there was no problem. He had a lot of friends on the mountain. There were not many who didn't know him and had never heard of him. The old tree spirit, who called himself the Lord of Heaven in the south of the city, seemed to have an immortal restriction on his body. He couldn't return to his true form for the time being. He was about 3 inches tall. At this moment, he was sitting on the shoulder of the young Taoist and drinking. He squinted at the boastful Lu Qiqing who was dressed in fancy clothes and cursed him for being a sissy. However, Lu Qiqing grabbed him and squeezed him in the palm of his hand before throwing him back to the young Taoist. The old tree spirit was drunk and disoriented. He asked Li Huai, "Your trusted subordinate was bullied. Are you not going to do anything?" Li Huai said he couldn't do anything. The old tree spirit immediately stood up and put the wine bottle on his waist. He straightened his clothes and bowed. "This immortal master is wearing a pink robe. She is really unique, like a peerless beauty who stands alone in the world." Lu Qiqing felt bored and slapped the old tree spirit gently. The old tree spirit held the mountain with both hands and complained incessantly. Li Huai had to intercede for Lu Qiqing. Lu Qiqing stopped. The willow tree spirit didn't dare to scold the pink-robed immortal master. He turned his head and spat. Suddenly, he remembered that this was the young Taoist's territory and quickly wiped it with the tip of his foot. Li Huai remembered something and said to Chen Pingan telepathically, "The old man left a package for you at the Yang family's drugstore. He said in the letter that you can go to his house and get it." Chen Pingan nodded. Li Huai took out a yellowed book from his sleeve. "Luopa Mountain became a sect, but I didn't attend the ceremony. It's overshadowed, right? The old man gave it to me. It's full of messy scribbles. I don't want to learn it, and I can't learn it. Just looking at it gives me a headache. I'll give it to you, don't mind it." Chen Pingan didn't refuse. He took it and said, "Consider it a loan. I'll return it to you after reading it." Li Huai said angrily, "Give it back to me." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "You haven't finished reading it yet." Chen Pingan suddenly stopped and turned around. It was the old sword cultivator Yu Yu. He had also finished walking around the bundle shop with the other tycoons. Other than the Miyun Xia clan, there were also young ladies from the Xianxia Zhu clan. However, they were not as likable as sword cultivator Zhu Mei. Yu Yu said to the young man beside him with a smile, "Xia Yuan, I'm in a good mood today. I'll tell you a secret. Can you keep your mouth shut?" The disciple of the Miyun Xia family from the Snow Peak continent was a little shameless. He said to the chief foreign minister of his family, "I promised Mr. Yu first. As for whether I can keep my mouth shut, I'll see. After all, it's not up to me." Yu Yu said, "You came to the Confucian temple to join in the fun. The person you want to meet the most is right in front of you." Xia Yuan walked over quickly. This handsome disciple didn't seem to have any doubts. He bowed to the green-robed sword immortal but didn't say anything. Silence spoke louder than words. This was called Xia Yuan bowing his head to the hidden official. Chen Pingan looked at Yu Yu. The old sword practitioner laughed in his mind, "Master hidden official, don't worry. Xia Yuan looks like he doesn't know what's important, but he knows what's important. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been groomed as the next master of the Xia family." He heard about Master Hidden Official's deeds through the family's secret channel in his early years and admired you. He even wrote erotic books about Lady Ruoyan from the Plum Blossom Garden, Nailant Saihuan from the Great Wall of Sword Aura, and the female sword immortal Song Pin from the Golden Armor Continent. Senior Hidden Official may not know this, but in the past 10 years in the Pure Jade Continent, 40 to 50% of the most widely circulated erotic books on the mountain were written by Xia Yuan. The number of female cultivators who wanted to beat him, if not 100, then at least 80. Chen Pingan returned the greeting with a fist salute to the young man. In fact, he wanted to punch this Jiang Shangjin from the Snow Peak continent to the ground. Xia Yuan straightened his back and suddenly reached out his hand. He probably wanted to grab Chen Pingan's sleeve, but he didn't succeed. The young man said resentfully, "I want to touch the celestial aura so that I can write like a god." Chen Pingan reminded him with a smile, "Master Xia, there are some books that shouldn't be spread." Xia Yuan looked at Lady Ruoyan beside the young hidden official and nodded. They were both men, so they understood tacitly. They parted ways. Xia Yuan wanted to visit a senior who was staying in the Parrot continent. The young flower goddess, whose nickname was Rui Feng, was full of joy. She rode the wind and rushed to the Parrot continent. She curtsied to the young secluded officer and thanked him sincerely. She said that Teacher Zhang was not angry, but happy. Chen Pingan smiled and nodded. He invited the flower goddess to be a guest at the Luopa mountain in the future. In fact, at the entrance of Lu Xian Yang's ancestral home in his hometown, there was a small canal passing by. Between the cracks of the rocks, there was a balsamia that was suspended in midair. The flowers bloomed in 5 different colors. In the early years, many young girls in his hometown seemed to like to pick the flowers and crush them, dyeing their fingernails bright red. Chen Pingan didn't think it was pretty at that time. Lu Xianyang had always talked about this flower growing in front of his house. The elders had a story about feng shui. In the end, a greedy little slug came to his house with a small hoe and secretly dug it away in the middle of the night. After daybreak, Lu Xianyang squatted in front of the door for a long time, cursing and swearing. That night, the little snot bug that had secretly planted the balsamine elsewhere was pulled by the ear and returned. To Lu Xianyang, who was in the dark, the balsamine at the door seemed to have grown legs of its own, running away from home and returning to its home. Lu Xianyang was very happy to have regained what he had lost. He said that this flower was indeed strange. At that time, Chen Pingan nodded and the little slug rolled his eyes and made a face. In fact, when Lu Xianyang and Chen Pingan each went to study and returned home, they both became mountain dwellers. It was then that they realized that the balsamia that looked beautiful in the past was actually just ordinary. Madame Huayan bid farewell to Chen Pingan and left. She brought the balsamia flower goddess to the bag shop again. She had secretly taken a liking to a few items. Lu Qiqing walked to the door of a mansion in Parrot Island halfway up the mountain and knocked on the door. A timid girl walked out. Her family's elders and a few good friends on the mountain were all on guard. They didn't dare to come out to meet this Lu Daochen from White Emperor City. In the end, they let her come. As for the green shirt sword immortal and the young Taoist, the young female cultivator didn't even dare to look at them. Even if she came from a sect, she didn't dare to be rash in the face of these fierce people who could arm wrestle with the leaders of big sections. Lu Qiqing smiled and said, "Miss, I am close friends with your family's elders. Can you let me borrow your house to entertain my friends?" The female cultivator nodded vigorously. Her master said that as long as Lu Daochen asked, she would agree to anything. Lu Qiqing pinched out a grain rain coin with 2 fingers and said, "Miss, after you take this grain rain coin, remember to return me 2 small summer coins." Her eyes were filled with doubt, but she didn't dare to disobey. After accepting the grain rain coin, she took out 2 small coins from her sleeves and handed them to the famous pavilion master of the colored glass pavilion with fear and trepidation. Lu Qiqing said with a smile, "There are so many beauties in the world. If 10 small summer coins were the full number, you would be very beautiful. Today, I see that your marriage is not shallow. It is a feast for my eyes. May I ask your name, where do you live, where do you cultivate, and whether you have a Taoist companion?" Chen Pingan came to Lu Qiqing's side and slapped him on the back of the head. Then he apologized to the young female cultivator and said, "Sorry to disturb you." If he knew that Lu Qiqing had friends all over the mountain, he wouldn't have asked. The girl shook her head and didn't say a word. She just made way for the door. The cultivators in the house had already left from the side door. They didn't dare to ride the wind. They met the young female cultivator at the ferry and left Parrot Island by ferry. The girl was anxious, but her master smiled in his heart and said, "You have made a contribution. When we go back, the ancestral hall will record it." After entering the house, in a secluded courtyard surrounded by cypress trees, Chen Pingan first took out the fish basket from his sleeve. Then he opened the box and took out the tools skillfully. He was ready to show off his skills to Li Baoping and Li Huai. Li Huai and Taoist nun brought in a table and chairs. Lu Qiqing took out a few pots of immortal wine. The table was full of dishes. There were a few golden carps, steamed, braised, and stewed fish. They looked, smelled, and tasted good. Chen Pingan asked with a smile, "How is it?" Li Baoping nodded and said, "It's delicious." Li Huai said, "It's much better than Pei Qian's." Lu Qiqing and Taoist nun looked at each other. They both felt that they had to show some strength of character and not say anything that went against their conscience. Chen Pingan glanced at the 2 guys who were eating so much that they became mutes. He nodded with satisfaction. Maybe this was what it meant to be beautiful without words. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, Chen Pingan put down his chopsticks. Li Baoping was still chewing slowly, and Li Huai was still wolfing down the food. Li Huai suddenly felt embarrassed. He approached Chen Pingan and said in a low voice, "Chen Pingan, I've read a few books. Can I talk to you about the principles in the books? If it's not right, you can forget about it." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Of course, you can. Just say it." Li Huai still didn't seem to be very confident. He only dared to talk to Chen Pingan secretly through telepathy. The books say that when a person has both great achievements and worries about himself, his life will be more tiring. Because he works hard on the outside, he works hard on the inside. You have a lot of titles now, so I hope you can find a few ways to relax. For example, liking fishing is good. The eyes of this young man in a scholarly robe were full of worry at this moment. Li Huai had never been good at reasoning with people. Today, he had done his best. Chen Pingan nodded and said, "Such a good principle. I will definitely take it to heart." Li Huai laughed. If he could reason with Chen Pingan, then it would be a pity if he didn't become a sage. Because there are many thoughts, other than staying in the grid, it's like thinking blindly at home. They must have seen something, that's why they have the synesthesia, translocation, and imagination. When I was thinking about this, I thought of another thing, which is even more difficult. For example, the book says that one is born from one. I'll assume that this one is 1 point. Youngest martial uncle, for example. Li Baoping's thoughts jumped around, and she spoke quickly, making her seem very imaginative. When she said, "Dao begets one," Li Baoping pressed her thumb and index finger together, as if she was pinching a mustard seed. She reached out and placed it in the air. The moment she said, "One is born from two," Li Baoping suddenly let go and immediately had 2 horizontal lines. 2 vertical lines pierced through the mustard seed. In the blink of an eye, countless more straight lines were formed. Chen Pingon instantly took out a caged sparrow. This immortal inn built on top of Egret Fairy Mountain was called Cloud Crossing Inn. In addition to the reed marsh at the foot of the mountain, there were large terrace-like paddy fields nearby. Egrets flew in circles, and sparrows grabbed the reed stalks. It was quiet and peaceful, giving off a rustic vibe. Fishermen on the water and farmers in the fields were already used to the rise and fall of the immortal fairies. Egret Fairy was less than 100 miles away from the nearest Qingwu Peak. These people at the foot of the mountain had lived in the boundary of Xingyang Mountain for generations, so they had seen many immortals on the mountain. Cui Dongshan personally brewed tea for the guests. The white-robed youth was like a cloud, making people forget about the world. After Tianwan sat down, she took a cup of tea from Cui Dongshan, but she did not dare to drink it. After all, she was here with her real body today. Previously, she had used all her means, including using her Yin spirit to travel far away, her Yang spirit to escape far away, and her camouflage technique. Unexpectedly, they were all intercepted by the two people in front of her. Moreover, they seemed to be certain that her real body was still in Xingyang Mountain, which made Tianwan feel helpless. She had manipulated the red string and played with people's hearts in the Aquarius continent for many years, and this was the first time she felt that her plans were not as good as God's. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "This is the tea that my husband brought back from Qingyuan Prefecture, Xianyu County. It's very precious and priceless. I'm usually reluctant to drink it. Sister Tianwan, try it. If it's good, you don't have to pay. After drinking the tea, we'll talk about business." Tianwan sneered and said, "Aren't you afraid that I'll send people to Xianyu County to track you down?" Cui Dongshan said helplessly, "Smart people don't say stupid things. Sister Tianwan, you're being insincere." Tianwan was smart because she never did anything superfluous. This was also the reason why she could live in seclusion in Xingyang Mountain in the Aquarius continent. This junior sister of Zhou Zi could make many smart people think that she was only a little clever. Xingyang Mountain Sect Master Bamboo Emperor, Pure Jade Realm's Patriarch Xia Yuansui, Tao Family's Patriarch Tao Yanba, and the sect's Discipline Master Yan Ji. These old sword immortals whose names shook the entire continent felt that Tianwan's seat in the ancestral hall of Xingyang Mountain was actually dispensable. Jiang Shangjin did not go over to drink the tea. She stood alone by the railing of the observation deck and looked at the children playing by the water. A group of children formed a circle and played a flower tug-of-war known as a shy girl. There was a girl with a red face who won against her peers. She grinned as if she had a decayed tooth. Jiang Shangjin smiled and squinted her eyes. Sort of Coming Chapter 801. On the side of the Parrot Island house, when a woman in a green shirt and that red shirt suddenly disappeared, Taoist Nen and Lu Qiqing looked at each other. Chen Pingon was not easy. Li Huai was picking the meat with a toothpick, and it seemed that he didn't realize it. Don't think too much about things you don't understand. Lu Qiqing was surprised, and asked curiously, "Friend Nen, when will Chen Pingon be ready to start the world?" As for the vision brought by Li Baoping's random words, Lu Qiqing was not interested in it at all. The tender Taoist caught a large chopsticks dish, chewed the fish, cheeks bulging, and said, "It is not the magic of the immortal family, but the magical power of this kid, a flying sword. The sword of the Great Wall. By the way, there are all kinds of weird flying swords, and Chen Pingon is a hermit official, so there is no need to make a fuss about friends Lu." The Taoist Nen lifted the chopsticks again and dropped it with his hand. A pair of chopsticks were as fast as flying swords, and they flew in the courtyard. After a while, Taoist Nen reached out his hand to catch the chopsticks, frowned slightly, and fiddled with only a small half of the braised carp on the plate. Originally, Taoist Nen wanted to find where the Xiaoxiandi barrier was, so I could say something like Lu Qiqing, see if you see it, this is the sword chi barrier, I just broke it. Never thought that the small world of young hermits is not ordinary, it seems to have completely bypassed the long river of time. Taoist Nen is not really unable to find clues, but it is equivalent to asking the sword, and the gain is not worth the loss. Taoist Nen made up his mind that as long as Chen Pingon entered the Ascension realm in the future, he would have to hide away from him. You should go to your mother's account if you get 10% of the income. Let Luopishan always owe Lao Zi's favor. Lu Qiqing didn't know what was the meaning of Taoist Nen's use of sword control, and asked, Taoist Nen, is this? Taoist Nen laughed and said, help the hidden officer to protect the road 1 or 2, so that there are still old rascals in the Ascendant realm who know nothing about life and death, and spy on this place by looking at the mountains and rivers. Lu Qiqing will doubt it. Now the Ascended realm monks near the Confucian temple, especially those who are not qualified to participate in the proceedings, Nan Guangguang and Jing Hao are half dead, Feng Shuatao drags Alien to another world, and the rest are shattered with courage. Tail life. God knows if a Haoran Nin Taoist will stop, and then run out of an old Taoist. From left to right, Liang has already taken action. Will it be Qi Tingji's turn next, and Lu Ji's sword repairmen will join in the fun? Taoist Nen took out a pot of wine by himself, he'll save it. Chen Pingon took out a set of tea sets from a nearby object and began to make tea, drew symbols on the table with his fingers, and boiled the tea soup with 2 dragons. The things at hand, and the things in his heart are actually waiting for Chen Pingon to solve one by one. Some things will be handled very quickly, and the things that used to be a big trouble with a few punches and swords are gradually no longer a trouble. There are some things you need to think more about and go slower. Chen Pingon gave Li Baoping a cup of tea each, and suddenly asked Lu Qiqing, is it difficult to build a mountain ferry? Lu Qiqing nodded and said, shipbuilding is not difficult. Find a few mahishts and artisans to train gas. As long as you are not a liar, you can piece together one. The hard part is to make money. The knowledge is not shallow here, and the water is deeper. As for transcontinental ferry boats have a higher threshold. The vast world relies on this Xianjia mountain to eat. There are only a dozen such ferry boats that can be built. In fact, there are only a handful of them. Why, you need to cross continents. Ferry. Chen Pingon, it's not that I poured cold water. I advise you not to go to the muddy waters. You are too expensive to spend money with people. I can help match the bridge, save worry, effort and money. Chen Pingon reluctantly said, it's like knocking on the door today. Thanks for this kind of worry and effort. Chen Pingon really needs to help Luopishan find a few new ways to make money. Once the next clan is established in another continent, Shantao has an intercontinental ferry, which becomes an urgent need. Lu Qiqing complained, you underestimated me. Forgot that I was in Baidi City, and there was a pavilion master. Before the disaster in Aquarius, there were a lot of business contacts on the mountain. I took care of it myself. Speaking of this, seeing Chen Pingon still unmoved, Lu Qiqing suddenly became proud, tapped his finger on the table, squinted and said with a smile, Chen Pingon, let me tell you a secret matter on the top of the mountain, in front of Holong. In the past few years, I sold many glazed tiles that I had searched from nowhere. They were of excellent quality, and they could rank among the first-class treasures of the Liuli Pavilion. There were 100 pieces of green glazed tiles. The real fire dragon only bid one price. Thousands and 500 grains of rain money, now my Liuli Pavilion, with this opportunity, finally refined into a flawless immortal soldier. Every time after the rain, the sky will be colorful, the radiance will be bright, and the beauty is so beautiful. In the future, there will be the selection of the Haoran 10 scenic spots, and the Liuli Pavilion, which has been unsuccessful many times, will definitely be able to rank amongst the place. Chen Pingon handed over a cup of tea and said, I believe that there will be trouble with your majesty in the Xuanmi dynasty in the future. Yuan Su still had to speak, and Yu Panshui smiled and said, Dignified 955, don't be like a lady. Yuan Su was not upset, he sighed, took the tea from Chen Pingon, and was bored. The result was so hot that he stood up, screamed, and finally took a stance, his face flushed, and his dantian became angry. Li Huai opened his eyes to the side. This young man is the emperor of one of the 10 great dynasties of Haoran. Very promising. Yu Panshui smiled and asked, in our mysterious arsenal, there is an idle ferry boat, which is still eating ashes. I don't know if there is a need for Luopishan. Yuan Su said vaguely, as long as you need it, you can give it to the hermit. Anyway, that ferry is a private item in my name, and no one can control it. Those old men in the clan mansion, who dare to talk, I will let Grandpa you broke with them. Yu Panshui smiled and nodded. Your Majesty is true, Chen Pingon, what do you mean by this? Chen Pingon said, no merit is not rewarded, and Luopishan can be bought with money. I don't know how many grains of rain money is needed. Yu Panshui stretched out and said, not much, just this amount of Guyuqin. I said in advance that this intercontinental ferry named Fengyuan has been around for quite a while, and I want to travel across continents. It can withstand the wind and rain, the sword ferry hacks, and it may need a bit of stitching, which will be a lot of money. Chen Pingan's eyelids trembled. A wind and kite cross-continent ferry can be bought. The Luopishan treasury managed by Wei Wenlong has small savings, but if they are used to buy the boat and build the next project, they will be stretched, especially this repair. In one matter, even Yu Panshui said it was a not small ferry money, and Chen Pingon was really unassuming. Yu Panshui is self-confident, but he is not hypocritical. If it was the embroidered tiger, at the beginning, there would be no talk of nothing meritorious. As long as you dare to give it in vain, I dare to accept it. Chen Pingon put down the teacup in his hand and smiled and said, then let's start with Mr. Yes, your Majesty's words are true. Then Chen Pingon said sincerely in his eyes, we need this ferry at Luopa Mountain. As for the repair costs, we have to pay for it with the Xuanmi dynasty first. Yu Panshui was speechless for a while. The young emperor felt that this was the hermit who was familiar with him. On the side of Bailudu, Tianwan still insisted not to lead Jiang Shangjin, only willing to come up with a cavernous secret realm that could support the monks to ascend to the ascending realm. Cui Dongshan was not in a hurry. Jiang Shangjin sat next to Tianwan and took out a piece of colorful paper with flowers and birds watching the beautiful flowers and the moon. The mist rose and a landscape painting appeared on the table. Tianwan said, my bottom line is to protect my own avenue. I have worked hard for thousands of years. I can't put it into running water. Otherwise, it will be different from death. Besides, as long as I have everything, you can just take it away. I just hope you don't. It's hard for a strong man. I don't believe in either of you either. This time I came to see me on a special trip. I was just asking for a bamboo basket to fetch water. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, what if we are really just having fun? Tianwan shook her head and said, I have decided, I want to kill or cut, whatever you want. Cui Dongshan shook his sleeves and took out the soul and soul of Na Tianwan from the big white sleeves, twisting his fingers into a wick. Even if she was close at hand, Tianwan didn't dare to fight for it, but her mind was drawn and her body trembled with pain. She still gritted her teeth and said nothing. Jiang Shangzhen's mind is on the scroll. Cui Dongshan glances after wearing glasses. Washuiyu said in shock, Chief Zhou, your taste is a bit heavy. In the picture scroll, there is a fat woman with heavy makeup, her head full of head, scratching her head there. Jiang Shangzhen sighed, Brother Cui, this is where you are inferior to the old cook. The woman just turned a deaf ear to her ears, began to dance lightly, raised her orchid fingers, her figure turned, and suddenly she looked back with a shy smile. Someone dropped the fairy money and began to curse wildly. Jiang Shangjin left a small summer money, was familiar with the road, changed his voice, and shouted, "Sister Jean, oh, this is so beautiful today." The woman scolded with a smile, "It's a dead, unconscionable thing, how long hasn't seen my sister?" Afterwards, the woman talked about the sword fairy of Fengshua temple in the Wei and Jin dynasties. Between words, the love and admiration was beyond words, and many men began to curse again. And some fairies who were silent before began to compete with those men and scold them. They are all female sisters on the mountain of Wei Daijiangxian. While helping his sisters to scold men, Jiang Shangjin took out an inkstone, and this side just started a beautiful scene. In the picture scroll, a burly man, Jean Dama, sitting on a chair, laughed and said, "Everyone, that Jiang thief, was successfully usurped by Wei Ying." He didn't say that he could not be the sect master of Yugui, but even the next sect. The true realm sect's position cannot be kept, it must be the situation of the rivers going downhill, it is very pleasant to drink a bowl. The cheers are constant, the chittering and drinking, one after another, can make a sound, of course, by throwing money, it seems that they are all those who are not short of money. Among them is Jiang Shangjin. Some people feel that they don't understand anything, that they have a bad life, because they don't know much about the truth. If you still have a bad life, tell yourself, so be it. In the end. Some people have never been Yang Lui or Chao Chonging Fei. On the road of life, he has been paving roads and bridges, planting willows all the way. Someone's eyes widened, struggling to find the shadow of this world. Sleep soundly when the night falls, and get up again when the sun goes 3 poles. Mingyue Mountain, thorny forest, green pond, spring wave peach blossom. The same rice raises hundreds of people, on different life paths, in the dreams last night, the flowers and the moon are in the spring breeze. In addition, Chen Pingan was bidding farewell to Jing Juzhong. After leaving Wenjindu, he found a martial artist from the Duduan dynasty and said he wanted to ask Quan. The man was puzzled, why? Chen Pingan said, no. Sort of Coming Chapter 802. The bamboo forest is like a forest, and there are huts. Facing the 2 sides, at the door of a thatched hut, is the great disciple of the female Valkyrie of the Duduan dynasty, Ma Zhuxian. The visitor man, with a slender figure, a blue shirt and a long coat, wearing cloth shoes, stands in the bamboo forest. From the 2 huts elsewhere, 2 women walked out separately. Their faces were young, but their real age was not that young. They were Ma Zuoxian's 2 younger sisters, one was born in the top-end tycoon Yunchuangdo, and the other Yamazawa Yi Xiu was born. He turned into a pure martial artist and joined the army. In the end, in a tragic battle, he was accepted as a disciple from the national teacher Pei Kup, who presided over the war. Dou Fenxia, with her head pierced in a snake bun, leaned on a green bamboo, with a lazy mood and a plump body. At this moment she squinted and smiled, carefully looking at the man in the green shirt who was bad. Just before she stopped, she bent down and picked up a few stones and a few bamboo leaves from the ground. Leaning on a green bamboo, she lifted her toes and poked lightly on the ground. Not far away, the younger sister Liao Qingai, because she had been involved in spiritual practice and entered the cave realm early, so even if she was half 100 years old, she was still a girl with a very thin waist and a long sword. These 3 fellows, Ma Zhuxian, as the big brothers, are on the top of the mountain. Dou Fenxia and Liao Qingai are both pure martial arts with the bottleneck of far travel. The 3 pure martial artists all hope to be among the 10. Therefore, in the eyes of the outside world, if there are 5 martial arts of 10 realms at the same time in the future, the martial arts of the Duduan dynasty will be prosperous. The breeze passed through the bamboo forest, the green shirt in the distance, the hair on the temples was slightly fluttering, the sleeves swayed gently, and the clouds and water rippled. In a daze, this person seemed to be in the secluded mysterious realm where the heavens and the man are one. This scene of the Qingling scroll is really eye-catching, and Dauphinxia is so glamorous to see, a young hermit who has never seen her name for a long time. It is no wonder that when she was a teenager, she was able to play 3 games on the city with her little brother. However, Liao Qing'ai had a frosty face and didn't have any good feelings about this person. He couldn't beat the junior, so he took advantage of Chao Si's participation in the Confucian temple discussion to find the senior's trouble. "What's this?" Ma Zhuxian smiled and asked, "Chen Ping'an, did you find the wrong person? When did Ma become so famous? If you just want to ask for fist and learn from each other, and practice martial arts, are there other seniors? It seems it is not my turn." Chen Ping'an shook his head and said, "I didn't find the wrong person, just looking for you. Unless you are not Ma Zhuxian." When the great master standing on the top of the martial arts mountain around the temple below, the light and the dark are added together, about the number of hands. Middle-earth Zhang Tiaoxia, Beiping's Song Changjing, Beiju Luzhou Wang Fuyu, Tongyi's Hao Wu Tan, Ai Zhou Pei Aoxiang are all 10-level martial artists of Quangaoi Zhou. Although Ma Zhuxian has always been arrogant, he doesn't have his eyes higher than the top, and feels that he can now compare with these predecessors. Among the 10 young people in the world previously selected, the hidden official in front of him is the 11th, with his dual identities as the 9-realm warrior and Yuaning Jinsho, occupying a place. It's just that Ma Zhuxian learned from the master and the younger brother that Chen Ping'an had actually already reached the 10th realm on Tongyi's Hao. Therefore, Chen Ping'an visited the house today, and asked him about his posture, which is equivalent to asking 9 states from 10 states. It is absolutely unreasonable and it is not honorable to win. Of course, Chen Ping'an really insisted on asking punches, and Ma Zhuxian didn't mind receiving punches either. Ma Zhuxian is a great warrior, and even a battlefield general who has emerged from the ranks. He now commands an elite frontier army of up to 200,000 people. So Ma Zhuxian was too lazy to think, and asked with a smile, how to ask. "Give you 2 choices. If you lose a punch, first apologize and admit your mistake, and then return something." Chen Ping'an said, "If you lose a punch, you will fall into the realm. There is no hope for 10 realms in this life. Later, I will ask Pei Cup for a punch and retrieve that thing." Ma Zhuxian was confused when he heard it. What is this all about? What apology? Who admits wrong? What to return? There is no intersection between him and Chen Ping'an. Dou Fengxian smiled, clenched the stone in her hand, raised the back of her hand, and pressed her lips, feeling that this young hidden official was a little bit cute and aggressive. Liao Qing'ai said coldly, "Chen Ping'an, this is not a place where you can go wild." Chen Ping placed it on deaf ears, but stretched out a palm towards Ma Zhuxian, indicating that the opponent can punch first. The grievances are clear. When I visited today, I only asked Ma Zhuxian about the boxing. I wanted to use the principles that Ma Zhuxian was good at, and use his own way to treat his body in the martial arts. Naturally, it has nothing to do with the Duduan dynasty, with the pair of masters and disciples like Pei Cup and Chao Xi, and with the 2 female martial artists Dou and Liao. But if someone must blend in with it, Chen Ping'an would make sense together. Liao Qing'ai turned her head to look at one place suddenly, with a displeased face. Even the monks on the mountain dared to watch the mountains and rivers from the distance. At the same time, Dauphinxia smiled and raised her hand. Pei Bei originally intended to accept only one disciple in this life, that is Chao Xi. It was because the war ended a few years ago. The emperor of the Duduan dynasty asked Pei Cup to ask for something. He said that he was an old man who likes to read Jianghu romance novels the most. He is his own Jianghu, and Pei, who is still very young. Girl, please. Let the rivers and lakes after Deduan dynasty be more lively. There are more masters. What are the 4 great masters, and what are the top 10 masters? Pei Cup agreed. So now Pei Cup has 4 progeny in name, the big disciples Ma Zhuoxian, Dou Fenxia, Liao Qingai, and the close disciple Chao Ci. Internally, the 3 except Chao Ci are actually just anonymous disciples of Pei Cup. Chao Ci is still the big disciple of the mountain and the disciple of the closed door. Externally, because Chao Ci was the youngest, he became the younger brother of Ma Zhuoxian. Chao Ci didn't care about this matter, but the 3 senior brothers and sisters, including Ma Zhuoxian, knew that only when they reached the 10th realm would they have the opportunity to be truly regarded as a succession by the master. Chen Pingan always stood in place, only gently rolling up his 2 sleeves. Ma Zhuoxian sank slightly, and there was a slight collapse in the mud under his feet, and his figure instantly left the place. Ma Zhuoxian was full of fists, and the large bamboo forest surrounded by the green shirt fell backward at the same time. Thousands of bamboo poles bent a huge arc. Chen Pingan remained motionless, pressed his palm against the opponent's elbow, slid back a few steps, handed it out with the other, tilted upwards, supported Ma Zhuoxian's chin, and suddenly exerted force. Ma Zhuoxian suddenly turned his head, avoiding Chen Pingan's seemingly understatement, but it was extremely fierce. He bends his knees and twists his waist and shoulders, his body sinks, his body rotates, one leg swept, and then no green shirt was seen. Only a large piece of green bamboo was cut off by the waist. Ma Zhuoxian stood in the clearing, wearing a green shirt in the distance, falling on the top of a broken bamboo, making a fist with one hand, and after the other, with a smile, he smiled and said, "I like to make a fist. Just being older, it's not a high level, you don't need to be so polite." Dou Fenxia narrowed her eyes and replaced her with herself. She must have been able to hide from the young hidden official just now. She was hit hard, and it is estimated that the punches will have ended, and she will be obediently recovering for another month. Ma Zhuoxian kept silent, took a deep breath, and opened a fist frame, with a bow full of the moon, with this 9-level martial artist as the center, and the bamboo forest around him bowed his head, instantly bending down the pole body, and the sound of breaking. Unstoppable. Afterwards, Chao Ci had to sit on the wall of Deduan capital, resting his cheek in one hand and rubbing his forehead with the other to loosen the bruise first. The bamboo forest was smashed into a 3-mile road by Ma Zhuoxian. On both sides of the road were bamboo poles that were crushed by fist gangs. In the end, the martial artist who was broken by the mountains and rivers in the small world, the martial artist of the 9 realms in the previous moment, the 8 of this moment. Jing Wu Fu, with his back on a green bamboo, his face covered with blood stains, his eyes widened, his arms drooped, his feet tried his best to hold on, and he tried to let his body lean against the bamboo, but he still couldn't stop the slow slipping trend. Dressed in the blue shirt, he bent over, stretched out a hand, held Ma Zhuoxian's forehead, helped him stand barely, bowed his head and said, "Remember, that senior, whose surname is Song Yushao, is the sword sage of Susui country." Chen Pingan let go. Ma Zhuoxian's pure qi was completely dissipated, and fell to the ground, leaning on the green bamboo. After being seriously injured, he drooped his head as if lethargic. It's not strange to fall into a state after nearly 20 punches, but it's strange not to fall into a state. As for the number of punches Ma Zhuoxian suffered, Chen Pingan didn't remember what he did. Chen Pingan turned his head and glanced at the 2 women Wufu over the hut. Dou Fenxia was in a heavy mood, with a solemn expression, without any more charming expression. She glanced at the blue shirt, the latter nodded slightly, then went to the top of the bamboo sea, stepped on a bamboo branch, and looked into the distance, as if the fist was over and Yufeng was about to leave. Dou Fenxia swept away, squatted down, and reached out to support Ma Zhuoxian's shoulders. Her face was full of sorrow for a while, and the brother really fell. Liao Qing'ek stopped at the entrance of the hut, took a step forward, suddenly clasped her fists, and said sharply, "Chen Ping'an, in 30 years, wait for me to ask for a fist." Chen Ping'an turned his head and glanced at her. "It's up to you." The next moment, a green shirt disappeared out of thin air on the top of the bamboo sea. At the same time, Chen Ping'an and the house of Liaozhou Island also disappeared. Two Chen Ping'an, who had been swaying around outside the Confucian temple, were able to return to the riverside, and the three became one. This riverside discussion is the biggest weird thing. Earlier on, following the 14th realm monks including Wu Shuangjiang, climbed to the Tuiyue mountain where the illusion was close to the truth. After Chen Ping'an reached the top with 1 foot, Chen Ping'an found himself back by the river. Chen Ping'an only vaguely noticed that there were some subtle changes in that long river of time, and he couldn't even remember, couldn't guess what he did or said between the 2 feet. Chen Ping'an always feels that things are not that simple. When he returned to the river, he only saw Li Xing and Bai Zai. Sir Yaxing, like the other 14th realm monks, disappeared. She is also missing. Chen Ping'an had to squat by the water's edge and continued to stare at the long river of time, learning from Li Huai, and not thinking much about things that he didn't understand. Only when I learned from the Parrot Island that Lu Qiqing, a local rich man, had spent a full 1,500 grains of rain money to buy 100 green glazed tiles from the Hulong real person. Just such a good at doing business, not to mention going to your own Luopa mountain as a clerk, you just learn from the great sword fairy and show the door to your wealthy god Wei Wenlong. You Lu Qiqing are not qualified. On the other side of Bay Azizi at Liaozhou Island, they borrowed money from others, but when they met Yu Panshui and Yuan Zhou, they owed money again. So Chen Ping'an looked at the mysterious river of time and didn't really think much about it. He felt that he was staring at a fairy money river. Can't help turning his head and looking at Li Xing. Li Xing smiled and said, "It's better to change your money bag." Chen Ping'an knew his idea of spending a lot of time on his own, it must be out of play. So I turned to ask about the knowledge of the Poziling. The Li Xing only replied, "When you leave here, Shiping will allow you to read the secret files of the Confucian temple." Chen Ping'an stood up and thanked him. Li Xing smiled and said, "There are often sword lights on the night boat. I hope you won't make people feel waiting, because you may need to see someone later before you can return to the night boat." Chen Ping'an nodded, puzzled. Who to see? Isn't he the most holy master? Chen Ping'an didn't dare to ask more. Bai Zai left the saint of ceremony and walked to Chen Ping'an alone. The two sides of different ages sat and squatted by the water, chatting about the customs of Aquarius. When Bai Zai went out that year, with the fox charm who looked like a woman in the palace dress, he traveled through the vast world together. The encounter with Chen Ping'an on the border of Dai, on the snowy night plank road, of course, Bai Zai intended it. Regarding Chen Ping'an's situation in carrying the real name of the great demon, Mr. Bai Zai said with a smile, "The situation will be much better when the hermit is in the fairyland." Listening to Mr. Bai Zai calling himself a hermit, Chen Ping'an was unavoidable. If one day in the future returned to the Great Wall of Jianqi, and experienced the barbaric world in the lower reaches of the south, it doesn't matter if Chen Ping meets anyone, just hope that he will not meet the one around him. But as long as you go to the barren world with only 2 bright moons left, it seems that it will be difficult not to meet Mr. Bai Zai. Chen Ping'an, you don't have to think too much, just do your own affairs well. Bai Zai smiled and said, "No matter what others are, as a scholar, you should be sure of one truth in your heart, you should do good things, and there are people who are books. Then you may not be able to profit from this on the road of practice, but at least it can make you feel at ease step by step." A tall woman dressed in white, she appeared next to Chen Ping'an first, sitting cross-legged, with a horizontal sword on her knees. Then came the old scholars, Yaxing, then Yu Dou, Lu Chen, the monk Shinqing, the female crown, the dragon slayer, the old Guanju, Wushuangjiang, and the rest of Chen Ping's unknown identity, all reappeared on the riverside. It seemed that everyone had traveled far away unscathed, as if all the 14th-level monks had a big dream. When they first awakened, they thought about that dream and became blurred. Everyone is like watching the moon on the shore by the water. Any thought is a pebble, and the thought is throwing a stone into the water. The ripples of the water will only make the moon in the water more blurred. Therefore, the great monks who really stood on the top of the mountain were all lost in thought, and no one spoke. Perhaps with the exception of the second head teacher of Bai Yujing, who was arrogant, Lu Chen seemed to hesitate to tell Chen Pingan, and asked, "How is the writing now?" The white-clothed woman sitting next to Chen Pingan took the lead and smiled and said, "A few years ago I was outside that day, and I had nothing to do. I opened up an ancient battlefield site and opened up a place to practice swords. The master can fly there in the future, practice there, go as you want, and return as you want. The Confucian temple will not stop it, right, saint?" Li Xing smiled and nodded. "Senior has the final say." Chen Pingan was frightened. Sure enough, the saint turned his attention slightly, looked at the sword-backed young man, and added, "Right, Chen Pingan." Chen Pingan had to bite the bullet and said, "Mr. Li Xing said it's fine." Lu Qin raised a palm and supported the crooked lotus crown on his head. Then he smiled with his palm, and exclaimed, "My hometown, the country of etiquette." The old master of Donghai smiled and said, "I haven't seen it in a few years, and I have great skill." The old monk folded his hands together, said Amitabha Buddha, nodded and said, Hui Zhen, Chen Pingan was rather helpless. "You are all 14th realms, and you count it all." The riverside atmosphere is relaxed. Li Xing suddenly made a beating with everyone, then got up, smiled and said, "After the discussion is over, we will go back to each house." No one asked anything, but in the midst of it, they seemed to have guessed something. Although the patriarch of the three teachings had never appeared in this discussion, he definitely looked at everyone behind the scenes. After going back to each house, there will probably be a clear result, waiting for everyone. Li Xing opened the restriction. Bai Zhe stood up and disappeared from the river bank first. The old scholar Pidian trot all the way, replaced by Zhe, sat next to Chen Pingan, reached out his hand, and said disappointedly, "This old Mr. Bai Zhe, how he is an elder, didn't pull a golden lump on the ground." Lu Chen stood on tiptoe and waved away. "Chen Pingan, see you later, waiting for you." Chen Ping's placement is deaf. The old monk Shinqing seemed to fight Chen Pingan with a smile, and said with a smile, "The weather in Dongshan, the romantic wind in the North Sea, the practice of Ding Huijie, the god will be the medicine master Buddha." Although Chen Pingan didn't understand anything, he still stood up, folded his hands together, and respectfully returned the old monk. Lu Qin smiled with satisfaction, and nodded to himself, "Sure enough, you should be more intimate with Xiao Dao, you don't have to pay attention to these polite manners." On the banks of the long river of time, in the end, a 14th realm great monk, like comets from the earth, went to the sky, and disappeared for a moment. Wushuangjiang will continue to travel through the wild world, looking for the trouble of the old deaf child on the Great Wall of Jinchi. Yudou glanced at the sword-backed young man in a blue shirt before returning to the world of Qingming and continuing to sit in Bai Yujing. The dragon-cutting man who is now alias Qin Zhuliu intends to find the Jinghao that has occupied the magpie's nest for 3,000 years. It is time to move the nest to the old master. Qinggong Taibao. What green palace? Naturally it is his place of cultivation. If he hadn't decided to cut the dragon back then Haoran wouldn't have only one Baidi city, there would be a Qingdi city first. Chen Pingan sat back where he was. She turned around, stretched out her hand, clenched her fist, and handed it to Chen Ping. An unknown Chen Pingan went inside, stretched out his palm, but she suddenly held it and smiled. since it seems to be just a blink of an eye, 20 years have passed, so thinking about it, the Jiazi covenant is nothing. I just take a nap in the place where you practice swords. Don't take other girls to the outside world at that time. If you don't enter the ascended realm by that time, you can say hello to Li Xing. Chen Pingan sighed and nodded gently, which was regarded as agreeing to her. The old scholar gasped in air, without squinting, sitting upright like a clock, and said awe-inspiringly, "The scenery on the other side is beautiful." She let go of her hand and stood up. Chen Pingan got up and said, "Why do you have to go to Tianwai? You can go to the Haoran world. For thousands of years, I have actually been in my hometown, and there is nothing to move around." She blinked. "Stay in Haoran world. I'm afraid it will be too jealous." Chen Pingan looked embarrassed and immediately shut up. She looked at Chen Pingan, saw herself in his eyes, and in her own eyes, there was only him. She smiled, took a step back, and said softly, "Go." Chen Pingan nodded. She turned the rainbow away, broke the sky, and went straight to the sky. At the next moment, Chen Pingan found himself at a mountain top. The top of Mount Sway. An old gentleman stood not far away, smiling and looking at him. Chen Pingan couldn't afford it, and he didn't know what to say. The old scholar jumped his feet and said, "How can this be done? How is it done? The ceremony is too great. I am a close disciple, no matter how young, no matter how diligent in academics, no matter how good the mind and cultivation ability, no matter how outstanding people are in the world, after all, I still cannot afford this. What a great honor." Li Xing stood aside, most not seeing the old scholar's virtue of being cheap and good-favored, and said with a smile, "The gift is too big? Who was begging for it before?" The old scholar rubbed his hands and said, "It's not good to hit people without slapping them in the face, or curse people without revealing shortcomings. I don't understand the rules of the saint of rituals. As a husband, why not ask for what you can ask for?" The old gentleman smiled and said, "Xiuzai, you disciple, didn't you say that you are so handsome?" Chen Pingan straightened up, a little embarrassed. Immediately, the inspiration came, and Chen Pingan was shocked. So before the 14 realm great monks gathered at the riverside, in the end, they didn't even know what to discuss, and it made sense. The old man hummed, nodded and smiled, "Smart, it's smarter than imagined." "That's right, you don't know how to read, what do you do with reading?" The old man laughed and said, "One person is good." Chen Pingan hesitated, waited for a moment, and had no choice but to answer, 10,000 people are exciting." The old man continued to ask more. Chen Pingan replied, "It's okay." The most sacred master smiled and nodded, "Very good." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "It's me, I didn't expect to meet again so soon." It is estimated that the noble Huang Zi, who is full of moral energy in the mountains, could not even think of the shop assistant who sold things to them. It was Wu Shuangjiang at that time. Zhao Yaoguang beat the chief inspector, got up and apologized again. He smiled brightly and said, "Last time on the ferry, the trail was offensive. Mr. Chen has a lot of it. Don't care about it. Mr. Chen really wants to care about it. When I went to Longhu Mountain, Xiaodao would definitely have to move out a few jars of good wine, and Mr. Chen would go with them." Chen Pingan clasped his fists and smiled, "If you don't go to the Longhushan Heavenly Master's mansion when you travel to the Central Earth continent, wouldn't it be a waste of time? But if you say in advance, you won't be able to greet guests with drums and drums." The Five Thunders of Dragon and Tiger Mountain is a well-deserved authenticity in the world. Chen Pingan has been fascinated for a long time. He only hopes that next time he visits the Tianqi's mansion, Longhu Mountain can allow himself to read a few more books. Zhao Yaoguang was stunned, the sound of gongs and drums. How to say? Could it be that the hermit Sama implied that he was tossing more lively and pompously? The point is that I am not a contemporary celestial master, so I don't want to be foolish. His own ancestor master is so strong, he looks younger than himself, standing on his fists, and walking on his arms. Chen Ping'an apologized when the little heavenly master didn't understand him, saying that he was nonsense, don't take it seriously. Lin Junbai had to explain to an unconscious friend around him, Ouyang stole into Longhu Mountain once. The hospitality of your heavenly master's mansion, I heard that the battles are huge, the thundering methods are constant, and the gongs and drums are noisy. Zhao Yaoguang was stunned immediately and smiled, no, I really can't. Because of the relationship between Wenqing and old scholars, Longhushan is actually in the same line with Wenqing, and the relationship is not bad. As for Mr. Zhu's early sword development, it was a personal grievance between Jian Shou. Besides, the elder of the heavenly master mansion who was destined not to be a sword immortal in this life, later turned to peace of mind to practice thunder law, broke and stood up, because of a blessing in disguise. The Taoist heart is clear, the road is promising, and whenever he drinks with others, he does not shy away from his back then. In the great catastrophe, I like to take the initiative to mention the questioning sword with Zhu Jianxian. I always said that I had suffered more than 8 swords from the left and the right, and suffered a few more swords than any other sword embryo or a certain sword repairer. This is what a hard record. Between his looks, there is a heroic spirit that is glorious despite defeat. In the past, when Hulong was still a great celestial master outside Longhushan, he met each other, one celestial master in one mouth, and now it's alright, after removing the title, one mouthful of Brother Zhao. It seems that at that time Longhushan rejected Zhang Shanfeng's succession, so that the real fire dragon was still a little bit unreasonable, and the grievance was not small. Yu Xian sighed with emotion, yes, this talisman is difficult to preserve for a long time, just like a talisman in the old way that supports a mountain. If you don't take the initiative to withdraw it, it will be loosened a few hundred or 8,000 years. Separated. Chen Ping'an's scalp numb when he hears the small talk of the 3 old Taoists. How could the separate words between himself and the fire dragon be heard by others? Fu Lu Yuxian and Great Heavenly Master, the 2 masters of Taoism, certainly wouldn't overhear the conversation. If they weren't so idle, would they follow some ripples in the long river of time and evolve? Chen Ping'an had to take the initiative to greet the 2 seniors. Zhao Tianlai smiled and said, the one-hand mine method used by the hidden official in Yuanyangzu is not tacky. Yu Xian smiled and said, throwing rocks and hitting people is too much, but just watch to relieve your anger. Huolong continued to doze off. I once defeated 1,000,000 sandmans, which made me feel more vigorous. The old and the young left Parrot Island and took the ferry to the Outo Mountain Mansion. Because the young emperor wanted to take this simple ferry for good reasons. He said that he could see a few monks from other villages. Maybe there are sages such as the hidden officer hidden inside. Then when he saw his roots, to be accepted as a disciple, I finally learned that he was an emperor, so I had to miss a cultivator with good materials and jade. The expert left sadly and regretted his life, and every time I thought of it on the mountain, I would have a handful of bitter tears. But when Yuan Zhou boarded the ship, he found that no one was responding to him. Yuan Zhou stood by the railing and said, Grandpa Yu, I always think something is wrong with our business. In the second meeting, even though Yuan Su was Emperor Xianmi, he did not participate in the meeting. The reason for Yupanshui is the year of your Majesty Ji is too young and the limelight is too big. When the wind blows, it is easy to blow his head away. So it was the result of his hard work in the Confucian temple. If your Majesty feels aggrieved, he will endure it. Of course Yuan Su was willing to endure it. The Xianmi Yuan clan was only a few years after the founding of the country, and he could never be the last emperor. Yupanshui smiled and said, something's wrong. Why didn't you say it just now? Your Majesty's mouth didn't sew it on. Yuan Su said, I am an emperor at any rate. If I speak out, the water poured out is a sacred decree. I really want to repent, and I have to be taken lightly by the hermit. On the way here, the two of them had negotiated and sold the kite ferry boat half sold and half delivered as if there was no such thing in the Imperial Library. The mysterious dynasty and Luopa Mountain are on the line, and there is some personal friendship between the two sides. In any case, half of this favor must be counted on the Yupan Shui head in the end, so the emperor was forced to come down. As the result came, Emperor Yuan Su not only gave a cross-continental ferry in vain, but the Xuanmi dynasty seemed to have to pay for the repair of the wind kite. Even Yupan Shui boarded the boat and left Parrot Island, still feeling a bit on credit. Well, your kid should tell you when to pay the money. If we don't ask, you won't say anything. You owe money like this in the world. In the end, there is still a face to say, but I am disrespectful, and I have suffered it before. Yupan Shui shook his hand with the handle and rubbed his aging face, thinking that when he was a little girl in the Hakka family, Pei Qian looked very honest and honest. He was a well-mannered girl, so polite. Counting a child, if it weren't for an old scholar, it would be shameless and stubborn. That old valuable thing was almost never sent out. After a whirl, it will be successfully returned to the bag. How can Pei Qian, who is not greedy for money, share such a wealthy master? Yuan Su looked around and said for no reason, Grandpa Yu, it turns out that there are so few yellow objects in the outer world. At home, in the palace, it's different. As far as he can remember, when he thinks of that side, the young emperor's mind is full of yellow objects, and the high roof ridges can't be seen at a glance. They are all yellow. The clothes he wears, the cushions on his hips, the dishes on the table, and the sedan chair swaying between the high walls on both sides are all yellow. It seems that there is only one color in the world. Other colors, for example, there is a library in the palace, which is black. There are many precious books that young people will not touch for a lifetime, but outsiders will never see it. As for the color of the generals, the color of the body is similar to that of a few circles of streams. They come and go in his house every day, and the cycle is repeated. There are often old people speaking childish words and young people speaking unpredictable words. And then he sat on that chair, didn't know how to pretend to understand, and when he encountered something big at a loss, he glanced at Fatty Yu. For the supreme emperor of the mystic dynasty, many gray-haired old civil servants had more or less hinted a teenager with words when Fatty Yu was not around. Yuan Zhou actually understood it, but pretended not to understand. Some old people are really good for him, and some are thinking that Yupan Shui left the court, so many official positions will move forward. But Yuan Su didn't pay any attention, and at most occasionally cooperated with the elderly, gritted his teeth, or slightly red eyes. In fact, it was very troublesome. At last, he reminded the eunuchs around him to talk to Grandpa Yu when he turned his head back to talk to Grandpa Yu, and don't forget his little actions when they came to the scene. What is it, and what good is it for him? Yupan Shui would not be the emperor, and the Xuanmi dynasty was also destined to be unable to lack the backbone of the Yu family. In that case, he is a fart eldest child, don't mess around. The old apricot tree in the palace, which has lived for 700 to 800 years, is said to have been planted by a founding emperor himself. In autumn, the tree will be covered with golden leaves and leaves every year. Green leaves every year. The deep-rooted Zhongti Yu family is evergreen without deciduous leaves. Yupan Shui rarely looked kind, touched the young man's head, and whispered, "It will be hard to be the master." The boy tilted his head and complained, "The emperor dares to touch his head." Yupan Shui laughed and patted the face of the young man. "Grandpa Yu is in a good mood to accompany you on this trip, so whoever the queen will be in the future, you can choose for yourself in the future. It doesn't matter if you have the surname Yu. Yuan Yu stamped his feet and said, I heard that you Yufu and Yu Qingqing, these two best-looking sisters you have their own hearts, who can I pick? Ah. Yu Panshui smiled and said, Qingqing's girl is interested in Lin Junbai, I know. As for the husband, I heard that with the hermit, I asked him twice at the Great Wall of Jianqi. Hey, do you understand? Yuan Yu slapped his boxing hands and exclaimed sincerely, Sister Huahu, oh no, it's a sister-in-law, it's not right, it's a sister-in-law with a good eye. Yu Panshui slapped the little boy into a daze. Panshui County is over there. A young scholar full of shabby air found an ascending realm great monk who was recovering from his wounds. Qinggong Taibao Jinghao, even if he was injured on the left and right, still did not leave, as if waiting for justice from the Confucian temple. The one who blocked the road and ran away and then apologized was the first monk who ran back to the house to become the door afterwards. It's just a jade realm, and it's not a shame to take care of the nursing home for an ascending monk. Most of the rest of the mountain helpers were scattered by birds and beasts. The good name is that they dare not delay the rest of the ancestor Jing. It's just that the jade cultivator fell to the ground with a flower in front of his eyes. Before fainting, I only vaguely saw a blue shirt passing by myself. This courtyard is quiet, and a cluster of emerald green plantains is as fat as dripping water. Jing Hao walked out of the house and looked at the young scholar standing in the courtyard. He has stood on the top of the mountain for thousands of years, but he has not found a suitable place to stay. I heard that it was Master Fu the fate is profound and helped the ancestor find this Qinggong mountain. Then he began to establish a school, accumulate merits at the Confucian temple, rank among the sects, open up branches, and eventually become the top immortal palace on Lixiaozi mountain, and now it is firmly in the top spot. Qinggong mountain has been smooth for more than 3,000 years, so Jinghao never had the opportunity to take the painting down the mountain. The land of master's cultivation has long been designated by Jinghao as the gate of the teacher. Except for arranging a female nun with smart hands and feet to clean it occasionally, even Jinghao himself has never taken a step. Chenjulio sneered and said, Isn't I here to climb my relatives today? So I can ask for a few kowtows with a trash junior. Jinghao shook his sleeves lightly. He actually knelt on the ground and couldn't afford it. His forehead lightly touched the ground 3 times. This junior will give Chen Xianjun out of Qinggong mountain. Jinghao's master, as well as the ancestor who once ranked among the 10 Haoren in history, are both in the Ascension realm, especially the latter, who was born in Zhongtu Shen's Haoxiu, and his real name moved the world. This is the real inheritance. When Jinghao took over the Qinggong mountain, it was not bad, and it was built into an ascending realm smoothly. However, the current lord of Qinggong mountain, or the former mountain lord, is much inferior, and he will only be a fairy in this life. This person has now obtained Jinghao's decree and has passed away in retreat. When Jinghao returned to Qinggong mountain this time, he had to make another decree for this unabashed disciple. How dare you pour dirty water on your master if there is less success than failure? The descendants of this person have the highest realm but Yupu, and the achievements of the future road may not be higher than this person. Therefore, the scholar in Qingshan who neither carried a sword or a sword in front of him said that their Qinggongshan generation is not as good as the generation, and there is no water at all. As for Jinghao's master, in the last 1,000 years of her monastic career, she was quite pitiful and hopeless. She suffered severe injuries from a grievance on the mountain. She had to turn into the wrong way. The young realm can only be able to avoid the calamity of the soldier's solution, with a clear mind, leaving the secluded into the dark. The shape and spirit fits the ancient earth immortal, and finally can't survive the rush of the long river year after year, and the figure dissipates from the world. She passed down a sword-throwing technique for Qinggong mountain, which was specially tailored for Qi practitioners who were not swordsmen. Before leaving the house, Lu Qiqing took out a piece of white cloud paper unique to Baidi City, wrote an invitation letter on it, and put it on the table. Of course, it was to invite the previous 8-money girl who didn't know her name or name to visit the Lioli Pavilion in Baidi City to enjoy the scenery when she had time. Her brother Lu would definitely welcome her by sweeping the couch. Li Huai was lying at the table at the time, shook his head as he watched, and took the courage to persuade the senior Lu, the wording in the letter, don't be so blunt, unspoken, and not implicit enough. While waiting for the ferry on the shore, Lu Qiqing was not surprised that Chen Pingon disappeared out of thin air. Come and go in a hurry, you are busy. Taoist Nen sneered and said, you are young and work hard, and you don't know what to do all day long. Li Huai complained, I said this to my brother in front of you, don't you give me face, Lao Nen, if you are so mixed up, you want eat and drink spicy. Taoist Nen immediately bowed his head and smiled and spoke in a low voice, and said in one go, Master, I have changed my way to praise Chen Ping An's responsibility, there is something in the words. Gu Qingsong came swiftly against the wind, his figure crashed to the ground, the wind was violent, and there were many people who were stumbling over the trainers waiting for the ferry at the ferry. Just waiting to see the person's face clearly, they all pretended to be traveling along the water, and quickly moved away, hiding far away. Lao Zhozi looked around, and still felt that only the awe-inspiring Taoist person was qualified to have a chat with himself. As for the Baidi City Lu Daochen, what kind of fancy, why not just marry Zhang as a lady-centered? Gu Qingsong hurriedly asked, Friend Nin, where is the kid? Where is the slippery soul? When Taoist Nen heard this, he felt refreshed, and said in a pleasant manner with this fellow, Gu Dao you said, that boy, if one is not paying attention, he will be gone. God knows where to go. If you have something to do with him, I can help with the conversation. Gu Qingsong cursed, what a kid, hiding from himself. Li Baoping looked at the old man who was talking increasingly ugly. Gu Qingsong noticed her gaze, he stared, but he endured it. After all, she was from a little girl's family, and she looked really pleasing to the eye. Such a spirited girl is not common, so this old Josie only played after less than a success, he said, look at what? Gu Qingsong felt a little bit when he said something. I always feel like I missed something important, but I can't remember. Close at hand, fishing for the moon in the water is generally futile. Lu Qiqing couldn't help but screamed, and he stopped talking. He just changed his mind and didn't dare to remind him, so he learned from the old brother long once. Sort of Coming Chapter 804. The saints, the sub-sages, the old scholars, and the 3 saints returned to the Confucian temple to participate in the discussions, which made the atmosphere that had been gradually relaxed, and the moment became more dignified, making some monks who wanted to go out for drinking and chatting to stay well. Next discussion. The old scholar sat in danger. After waiting for a long time, he couldn't hear a congratulatory message. He was a little confused. They all said that when people take the tea to cool, they saw the warmth of the people, and the world is cold. How can the cold stove rise again? This group of people, big and small, there is no indication. In the Confucian temple, to restore the status of accompaniment to sages, I don't like things or sadness, but it's not the reason why you don't put a single fart. When old Master Fu saw the virtue of the old scholar who took care of himself and his eyebrows, he smiled and explained to the old scholar the general changes on the previous side of the Confucian temple, Yunbian, Lantai, Hulian, Chunso and Tongli, a total of 5 academies. These mountain leaders lost their titles and had a fight. Among them, the youngest one, Chunso mountain leader, also openly questioned the saint of ceremony, and was finally sent out by Aliangli. Therefore, everyone's heart and words are more cautious. The old scholar exclaimed, the tiger father has no dogs. Yashing took out a book from a large stack of books and glanced at the position that had just been replaced by a young hidden official. There was nothing he could do about it. Isn't it just not a home? With a flash of golden light, Jing Xingxi at the gate reached out and caught it. It was a book page, and he received a secret letter from the Great Wall of Jianqi to accompany the saints. Li Xing put down a geographic booklet that he had just sent from elsewhere, and said, Liang and Qingmi have already arrived at the Great Wall of Jianqi. It looks like they want to join forces and go all the way south. Having said this, Li Xing smiled and said, You continue to discuss matters. Yaxing frowned slightly. Li Xing said with his heartfelt voice to Yaxing, Liang took Feng Shuetao and went to Shirwan Dashan first. He set up a stove over there and said that it is hot pot and wine. I have the world. Yaxing stretched his hand against his forehead. After Lu Ji heard about this, he asked, This concealed Yi Shuqing's secret has only been cut a few swords from the left and right, so he immediately turned to become a hero? Qi Tingji smiled and said, It must have been driven by Liang to put the duck on the shelves, so Qingmi would not agree. Left and right said, This Qing's secret has a good escape method. Its combat power is higher than Jing Hao. With Liang leading the way, it is difficult for them to fall into a circle in a wild world. Killing Liang is the most troublesome. If it is determined that the sequelae is not significant, Chen Pingan even wants to take the initiative to become the lord of a city on the night ship. Shiping said that when he returned to Chen Pingan, he brought to Chen Pingan's collection of books in this temple, but the books cannot bring out the merits, and they need to be returned after reading. Because of these books, the Confucian temple, as a rule, only the saint-sages and the head of the academy can read them. However, since the saints of rites have personally approved it, it is natural to use them at their discretion, but they cannot be too illegal. Chen Pingan had doubts, but did not ask much. Shiping seemed to have guessed Chen Pingan's mind, and took the initiative to explain that in order to cultivate the Confucian supernatural powers, he needs to learn the method of borrowing characters from the wise men of the academy. After Chen Pingan heard this, he first thanked this Jingsheng Shiping, and then asked him for a set of manuscript scriptures, saying that he had asked for his student Chao Qingqing, because he missed this student ceremony. If it can be supplemented with the Shijing handwritten secret, Chao Qingqing will definitely cherish it again. Shiping smiled and said, I do have 2 sets of manuscript scriptures in my collection. They have been around for a long time, and their appearance is pretty good, but it is not easy for readers to copy books. Chen Pingan immediately said, According to the current market price of copy books from the Confucian temple, the most expensive one will double again. Shiping at the gate turned his head, glanced at the sincere young hidden official, smiled and said nothing, neither nodded in agreement nor shook his head to refuse. I heard that on the Jianqi Great Wall, no one can make money from Chen Pingan. Pieces of Shiping stone scriptures were erected at the entrance of the Confucian temple, and later generations copied books as a means of living. Most of them were children of the Han nationality who had never had an imperial examination fame. Generally, they couldn't make a lot of money. Those who study here and earn money to return to the hometown, even if someone writes in a very beautiful lowercase letter, that is, they are asking for more than 10 taels of silver. So if the price is doubled, where can it go? A set of scriptures from Shiping, a handwritten secret copy of Shiping scripture, was bought by Hermit for 30 taels of silver. Shiping suddenly laughed, Okay, sell 1 set and get 2 sets. The total price is 1 snowflake. It is not easy to earn a few hundred taels of silver from the hermit. Chen Pingan asked tentatively, At least 1 set is written by Mr. Shiping, right? Shiping nodded, turned around, and copied the book. The real fire dragon Tut said astonished, Chen Pingan, you are doing business with a straight face. Yes, you can, then you should also know that the mountain is also a person who likes to read, eh? Chen Pingan thought for a while and replied, According to Lin Junbai, it is a place where people can forget their lives. She asked again, I want to know what you think. The young people around him were all scholars, and they were all foreigners from the Great Wall of Jinchi, but they could all be regarded as hometown by Jian Xiu over there. Chen Pingan scratched his head and didn't say a word, just seeing that Mrs. Kingshanshan didn't want to leave until the answer, so he borrowed Su Yuangxia's saying. It is not a place to hide dirt, but a place of revenge. Anyway, this is what Chen Pingan said. As for the other answer that Chen Pingan didn't say, there is nothing to say to outsiders. Both myself and my beloved woman were still young girls. Ning Yao came to him from the Great Wall of Jinchi. He went to Jinchi Great Wall to see Ning Yao. Aquarius Island, in the dark. The eager crossing on Jingyang Mountain was drizzling, the road was soft, and the night breeze was cool. 2 people when they come and 3 people when they go. A scholar in a green shirt, a teenager in white with a mole on his forehead, there was a young girl with sharp eyes around her, Ting curled up, and she was helping the young man in white with an umbrella. She occasionally has a pair of smart eyes, and a look of pain flashes. At this time, the boy in white will gently hold the umbrella handle. Then the girl's eyes will immediately regain her clarity, a pair of moisturized eyes, occasional emotions, like spring grass growing in a pond, clear and shallow, and see the bottom. This is the end of Tian Wan's bet with Cui Dongshan. The bet is that he doesn't need Tian Wan and Chief Zhou to lead the red line, he only needs to let him travel through her heart. Before that, he will give her a few days, close the door with her, set up the obstacles. In the small world, Cui Dongshan's only requirement is that the sedan chair don't move. If you break the oath, there will be no more land in the world. Jiang Shangzhen said with emotion, Peanuts, Peanuts, what a good name. Brother Cui is really the master of the mountain. Cui Dongshan said solemnly, of course the name is very interesting, but he doesn't even have half the skill of my husband. The girl looked resentful, she didn't think the name was so good and rustic. She only knows that she has amnesia and can't remember anything, and the most troublesome thing is to forget all the things of yesterday. As for the 2 around him, one is her brother, and the other is the father of her fiancé, who is married by her parents. That's right, the man in the blue shirt looks young, but he has frost and snow on his temples. His true age is definitely not young, but he doesn't appear old. Thinking about it again, if his fiancé looks a bit like his father, it is probably not too bad. Also, remember, if there is an old the mountain called Changming who wants to talk to you about information, you should follow her a little bit, and just look at it. That sister, she is older and has a bad temper. The money bags in our house, we 2 brothers and sisters, don't be familiar with her. She nodded vigorously, I see. Cui Dongshan smiled and stroked her head. Lupashan's Hangla lives for a long time. From now on, Peanuts and the little dumb that Pei Qian picks up will be her right hand. One is cruel, the other is cruel. It will be the 2 shadows hiding in the shade of Luopa Mountain, working hard and only doing dirty work. The premise is of course that the husband is willing to agree to this matter. This is an unwritten rule of Luopa Mountain, no one has to violate their will, everything is easy to discuss. Cui Dongshan hopes that this rule can last for hundreds of thousands of years on Luopa Mountain. When the break is constant, the chaos will arise. When you do not kill, the big thief will be the one. Jiang Shangzhen said with a heartfelt smile, on this matter, I will help you talk to Chen Pingan. If it doesn't make sense once, just say it a few more times, until it bothers him. When the chief of the week called Chen Pingan by his first name, he must have been speaking seriously. For example, when it comes to the Uafuti in Fox Country, the direction of Luopa Mountain is correct, but there are many flaws. It's just that I haven't found the seat that the chief enshrines at that time, so I didn't rush to check the omission. Besides, there are some small truths, it is better to say it early than late, because it can be more targeted and discuss the matter, correcting small mistakes and turning them into bigger ones. The three of them walked to the ferry port and waited for the ferry. At night, there were few monks on the shore. Most of them glanced at the three, and then stopped watching. Cui Dongshan blinked and asked with a smile, "Chief Zhou, such a beautiful and beautiful friend and beautiful woman, you are so talented, you have no poetry. Maybe I am a little inspired." Jiang Shangzhen coughed, paced slowly under the umbrella at the ferry, pondered for a moment, his eyes lit up, and he was seeing a swing outside the wall, echoing with thin waists, slim and slender and Yunping. The Chuckle-Lang looked up, and he called out the wall outside the wall. "Name." Cui Dongshan gave a thumbs up, "It's absolutely devastating." The girl suddenly raised her hand, pressing the back of her hand against her forehead. For no reason, remembered a series of past events. Her family was born in a local prefecture in a small vassal country. Her father was full of poems, and her mother was a lady of the family. She was a good match for others to admire. Her father had a smooth sailing in the early years. Transferred to the place to serve as the county judge and promoted to the prefecture. It's just that the Hua Hai is ups and downs, was framed by colleagues, lost the official and returned to his hometown, and served as the lecturer of the college in his hometown of Fenyang. I never thought that my father would be placed in the center of the officialdom and pressured the local government. He was so crowded that he could not stay in the academy and died in depression. Therefore, his family was in decline, not as good as every year. Even the tired brother couldn't participate in the imperial examination, so he had to take refuge away from his hometown and find a mountain sect to rely on. After getting the family letter, as soon as she heard that she was suffering from loss of soul disorder, she immediately worked hard, went home and found her, and then relying on the future husband-in-law and his father's way, the three of them traveled thousands of miles together, and finally got here. For the fairy mountain of the bull ears on the continent, we must find a respected old immortal master with the title of Moving Mountain Ancestor, on the mountain. The girl couldn't cry, turned her head and said, "Brother." Cui Dongshan rolled his eyes and said, "Shut up, don't always bother me, the frozen bird must be silent." The girl was silent for a moment. Cui Dongshan squatted on the shore, and the girl just bends over and holds an umbrella, and when she hears this elder brother who is dependent on each other, she seems to be reciting an immortal poem on her own. The emperor is in the earthquake, Long Desi Chen. The immortal visits Changchun Palace and rides a white dragon without a cloud. It is easy to find immortals in Dongshan, but it is really difficult to find in Beihai. People who make up the sky and repair the moon want to be romantic through the ages. But with the South China Sea rising green, brewing longevity wine. Mr. Weiyuan paid frequent visits and asked Xian more. Jiang Shangzhen sighed and said, "Brother Cus poems and essays are filled with celestial spirits. For a mundane master like me, I must kneel and listen." Cui Dongshan patted his palms, stood up, took a step back, and then hit Jiang Shangzhen's knees with a kick. The two began to push, play and squabble, screaming, fisting, unhappy or not heavy. The girl only felt that this scene seemed to be sentimental. She seemed to be less afraid of the Luopa mountain for a while. Jiang Shangzhen raised his head and looked towards the night. After the drizzle stopped, Yun Kaiyue gradually came. "Thank you for pitying me, I can't bear it tonight." Mist, and mist are all good signs, just on the mountain, not under the mountain. The white man with both temples, holding an umbrella and looking at the deep night with gentle eyes, murmured, "Life is not enough, there is already a Qing, and he still wants to live long." The girl felt that the man's words were much better than the previous poem. Back then, she was just an ordinary flower in Baiwa Footy, and her rank was not high. At that time, she was named Xiangxiu. The name Xiangxiu, he has been away for a few years, and has been abandoned for many years. She put down the pen, gently opened her arms and put it on her back. There were 4 small characters in it: clean mind and nourish energy. It was written that the dragon and the snake flew away, and the spirit of the word was just like that person. Even if she knew that the Confucian temple was discussing this time, the chance of meeting him was not great, but she was thinking of the in case. In case is 10,000. Lin of Confucian Temple of Merit. Wenxing is in the same vein. Old scholar. Around, Lu 16, Qin Pin gone. Li Baoping, and the little spirit who was brought to the world by Lu Shilu from Yuofu. And Mao Xiaodong. The old scholar was very fierce drinking, and soon became drunk and dim, muttering, "Is it true?" After getting drunk, the dreams come true, which made this old man a little bit incredulous. The old scholar suddenly slapped the table. It doesn't feel like yelling while drinking. Who can say something? All eyes, without exception, were lost to Chen Ping'an, the student, junior, and junior uncle. Before, Chen Ping'an had just a horizontal sword on his knees, sipping wine, thinking about someone. Suizuixiang, the world is small, the universe is narrow, ancient and modern short. Smiled and caressed Qingping, with a 3-foot sword in his hand, never lost his life. Sort of Coming Chapter 805. Night Ship, Lingxi City. In the evening of this day, Ning Yao planned to go to the next city. She just opened the night ship ban, and the sword light went straight into the sky. So that Zhongtu Confucian Temple knows the whereabouts of this ferry. Before leaving, Ning Yao brought Pei Qian, millet grains, and the white-haired boy to find the female city lord who is known as the Haoran World Graceful Poetry Sect. In addition to thanking Lingxi City for the hospitality, he also helped Chen Ping'an's friend Jiang Shangzhen. Give her a message. Mrs. Li and the handsome boy with the first antlers walked on the covered bridge above the sea of clouds with some foreign guests. There was a beautiful sunset near the covered bridge, like a precious lichen of bright red color. Climbing high and overlooking, the scenery is pleasant, the mountains are beautiful day and night, the birds are reunited, the world is quiet and peaceful. Mrs. Li was suddenly upset, because at the end of the bridge, an uninvited group of guests came from Xingqing City. She admires Ning Yao, but that doesn't mean she likes all sword repairs. Ning Yao is to the swordsmanship of the world, just like she is to the poems and essays. She will never lose to any man, ancient and modern. Ning Yao frowned slightly, wondering how this night ship would have an ascendant swordsman for no reason. Could this person come for Chen Ping'an? But the opponent seems to be hurt. Ning Yao turned his head and said to Mrs. Li, "I came to see us. Madam will just sit on the sidelines. If Lingxi City is accidentally broken, I will definitely pay the price afterwards. She has no money, Chen Ping'an has." Mrs. Li nodded, really unwilling to mix up these awe-inspiring right and wrongs and grievances on the mountain, so she left here with the boy with antlers who was born from the cultural movement. Criminal officer. The direct disciple Du Shaonin. Handmaid Jiqing, the incarnation of ancestral money. Du Shaonin saw the sword-backed woman, a little nervous, called Ning Jianxian, and then self-registered, and said that he was living in the streets of Jianqi Great Wall. Ji Qing smiled sweetly, gave a blessing, and called Miss Ning. Ning Yao nodded in return. There was a rare smile on the criminal officer's lifeless face. He signed up, "My name is Hao Su. I was in the Great Wall of Jianqi and I have been in jail." Ning Yao felt stunned, clasped his fist and said, "I have seen senior criminal officer." She has not seen a criminal officer, but has heard of the name Hao Su. Chen Shi, who was renamed Qin Ji in Feishing City, mentioned it to her a few years ago. Said that next time the door is opened, if this person can come to the fifth world and is willing to continue to serve as a criminal officer, it will be a great help to Feishing Cheng. Criminal officer Hao Su, although he had a natural prejudice against Chen Ping'an, it was only because Chen Ping'an had a blessed land. The millet grains immediately learned from the good man mountain master, embraced the green bamboo stick, bowed his head and clasped his fists, and became old. Ning Yao introduced, Millet is the right guardian of Luopishan. Haosu had a small accident. Chen Ping'an's hometown, Shantao, found this little spirit in the cave realm to protect the mountain. The man stands on the covered bridge, watching the visitors with different moods and the same scenery. There are two styles. Cold mountains and cold waters can be seen in the clouds, white grass, red leaves and yellow flowers. The man who was going to say hello to Ning Yao and left, hesitated and said in his heart, let him be careful about the calculations in the dark. There are about 20 people who are scattered in Zhuzhou. As for who it is, there is an oath, I can't say more. So much to say. He didn't bother to speak even if he could. Ning Yao smiled and said, who should be careful, maybe. Haosu sighed. Isn't it any woman in the world, as long as she likes anyone, it's so unreasonable? Haosu said, leave aside my unreasonable prejudices, it is really surprising that he is a hermit. It is not easy. Ning Yao said, I am not surprised. Haosu choked for a while. Ji Qing smiled secretly. This Ning Yao and the young hidden official seemed to have diametrically opposite temperaments. How did the two get together? Haosu smiled and said, in the years of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, compared with Xiao Yan or Chen Ping'an, I, the criminal officer, should have nothing to do, but when I waited this time, I wanted to count on my enemy. Clearing the old accounts, as long as there is a chance in the future, it is my duty to be able to serve as a sword repairer purely for Feishing City. Ning Yao holds a fist to thank you. Haosu left, the sword opened the night, and he left the night ship with his concubine and maid. After preparing to set up the two people around him, he was alone and quietly rushed to the divine continent of China. As for the 100 Flowers land, I won't go. It's useless to miss it. It's better not to see. Leaving the night ship, the sea is vast and unknown. Haosu glanced at the stars at night and pinpointed a direction. Yufengshi Haosu and his direct disciple reminded, Du Shanin, remember that promise. You must learn swordsmanship. Kill the flower-picking thieves in the mountains under the sky. If you break the contract, even if I can't ask the sword myself, you will die. Du Shanin was a little bit unwilling before, and he was horrified when he heard the words, and respectfully said, Master, the disciples will definitely keep their promises. When this life enters the ascending realm, it is the day when the flower pickers on the mountain will be extinct. I don't know what the relationship between Master and the 100 Flowers blessed land is, so that Master hates the flower pickers on the mountain so much. According to the posture, as long as he didn't enter Lingxi City for a day, Xiancha would be able to wander on the night ship. In the end, the owner really couldn't stand it, and got the boat's advice from the master. The latter did not want Xiancha to stay on the night boat for too long, because perhaps the third master of Baiyujing would miss too much, and once he was separated by a world of Lu Xin, took the opportunity to master all the mysteries of the Fairy Avenue. Maybe it would be accidental. The night ship left Hauran, drifting to the Qingming world. What can't Lu Xin do? It can even be said that this Baiyujing's third head teacher only likes to do things that the world can't do. Mrs. Li only met Xiancha. She never thought that this old boat was really insane. The ghost has fought the wall for more than 100 years, just to thank her and say that Mrs. Li has an initial phrase. It's the best in the world, the first is the best. Suzy and Liu Qi are all written in a smoky atmosphere. When I met Mrs. Li's flower chant, I had to stand aside. It turns out that Mrs. Li once wrote an ode to osmanthus, but she compares herself to sweet-scented osmanthus. Since she is the best among flowers, Mei Ding will be ashamed. As a result, he was appointed by that Xiancha as the first word in the world. After thanking him, Xiancha was sent out of the country by the ship's master's gift. Master Zhang smiled and reminded this person not to come again in the future. Night ships are not welcome. Never thought that the old Josie snorted and broke the place, so I won't come. The thought of Xiancha made me feel bad. The antler boy hurriedly changed the subject and said, the woman who doesn't talk much, Wufu, has a pair of brilliant eyes. Mrs. Li was absent-minded, nodded and said casually, since people's eyes can pretend to be the sun and the moon. The monks on the mountain and the ordinary masters under the mountain can't accommodate a few people in front of them. The owner is sad, and the antler boy is sad. Before his life, the Lord finally settled in a foreign land called Linen, but he never wrote a poem for that beautiful place. Yayin Jin on Linen, Qizhou, Qingzhou, Hangzhou. On the Gongdalan side of the Confucian temple, visitors kept coming, staying more and more soon, just chatting with Wen Xing. Lu Qi and his good friend Chao Zhu, the monk of Xiankong Temple knowingly, the Feixian Palace holds the shadow, the pair of Taoists in Tianyu Cave, Fiazulioxia. 4 of the 5 mountain monarchs of Middle-earth came. Except for the great Suishan, all came. Wuhu Shuijun came together even more. Among them was the Moon Lake Li Yeho, who took his maidservant Huang Wan, and he was a hero of the boundless martial artist. Li Yeho brought a few pots of his own wine to the old scholar. At first glance, he was familiar with the old scholar, and he laughed. Every time Lao Xiuzai receives visitors, Chen Pingnan is always with him. As for the monarchs and national divisions of the major dynasties, there is no need to rush to the wild battlefield, go back to dispatch troops, call on the monks on the mountain, and temporarily build a ferry suitable for traveling across continents. It is all a matter. Before rushing to the barren world, the real fire dragon came to the Kungdalin, and the old scholars called brothers and sisters, greeted each other and persuaded each other to drink non-stop, all drank blushing drunk. The fire dragon swayed to his feet and pulled Qin Pingon alone. The two walked side by side. The old man hiccuped and said with a smile, "It's a good thing to be famous as early as possible. It's a good thing in the world, this requires you to pay more attention to yourself. The reasoning of others and the experience of the elderly are not as reliable as you yourself." Chen Pingon nodded, the younger generation will pay attention. From the inside of his sleeve, the real man Huolong took out 2 sets of sheeping stone scriptures. Chen Pingon was impressed, and he was still young and ignorant about trading. The real fire dragon handed the 2 sets of sheeping manuscripts to Chen Pingon, and smiled. "One of them, when you reach Potty Peak, you will give it to the mountain yourself. In addition, this set was bought by poor Dao for you, boy, since it's a business, then the skin is thin, it won't work." Chen Pingon nodded and said, "I have been taught." The real fire dragon whispered, "The world has only been peaceful for a few years, and there have been turmoil. Just a few news from the poor road, a dynasty emperor was attacked on his own ferry. The national teacher and worship were all injured, the 2 assassins are dead men, and they are destined to be another unsolved case on the mountain without a head or a tail. A civil strife broke out on the side of Tianyu Cave, and Feng Zuido's Qinggong Mountain, the former suzerain who had thought about it, died violently. Xiao Yuan Chao Pu, the old master of the dynasty, was on the hilltop, as his home in other continents. It was also tossed and suffered heavy casualties. The Zhu Shitang was inexplicably killed and Yang Chong left. Bai Wafuti and Mrs. Dandin on the other hand, being conspired to be the most dangerous. Don't look at the mother-in-law Qingzhong, who is easy to talk on our side, not bad, and very sent. On the other hand, she was aggressive, and she was killed in the dark. Clean. Chen Pingon was silent with his hands in his sleeves, and he was mentally arithmetic. These large and small disturbances happened near the Confucian temple. Obviously, it was a battle between the Wild World and Tuoyua Mountain against the Confucian Temple. It seemed that it was a few meaningless enthusiasm battles, which consumed those pieces of chess that had been buried extremely deep, but things were not that simple. Huolong patted Chin Pingon on the shoulder, and suddenly said, "I don't cherish my life and survive without ruining the festival. I don't have the courage of a man on weekdays. When it's critical, tens of thousands of people are going to be a man." Chin Pingon said, "Don't dare to be." The old real man stared, "Is the poor road talking about you?" Chin Pingon said, "I have admired the ancient style and chivalry of real people for many years, but the younger generations have not learned like them." The old man patted the young man's head and laughed, "Smelly boy." The old scholar exclaimed in the distance, "What about it?" Chin Pingon asked, "Where are Mr. Yu and the young Yuan Su?" The old real man smiled and said, "So the poor Dao will help Xuanmi protect the Dao. Being a man can't just take advantage." After the fire dragon left, Chin Pingon returned to his husband. "I'm going to tell you something that doesn't sound too good. Except for the old man and the saint, the whole world is vast. Don't think that without yourself, the sky will fall." The old scholar said, "So you can wait until you have enough energy, and it won't be too late to kill the big thieves." Chin Pingon nodded and said, "Understood." Later, the wife of Dongzhu from Zhongtu Chanwan also came to visit Wenxing. She is a woman with permanent color and looks like a girl. Next to me was a girl named Xin Shi, who was holding a peach blossom fan, with a bright moon painted on it, and a poem written on bamboo branches. The old Shotsai just pulled up left and right this time. The latter was at a loss. I don't know what his husband meant. When Mrs. Juanshou, the master of the cave, talked to Mr. Wenxing, the girl from the temple was looking at Mr. Zhua, who had not seen each other for 100 years. From left to right, he saw the girl's questioning eyes and nodded and smiled. Once, after 2 times, he ignored her. Since this girl who cannot remember her name has missed Chui Yang for many years, why didn't she go to Aquarius Island to meet her for more than 100 years? Chen Chunhua, the mellow scholar of Nanpa Suozhou, the contemporary patriarch, Chen Chunhua, in addition to visiting Wenxing, he also had conversations with Chen Ping'an, including Lu Xianying, who had traveled far to study. The old master Fu Xing still came to Chin Pingon to talk about Lu Qingfeng in the Aquarius Lion Park. In addition, young Qing Yan, the national teacher of the Chongxian department of the Diyuan dynasty, took this opportunity to chat with Chin Pingon about business matters. As for Lei Gongmiao Pei Oxiang, his female disciple Lu Suiyu, and an old martial artist named Wang Fuyuan, they rushed to Chen Ping and Pei Oxiang came to Chen Ping'an because of the money. When Master Qian met, the 2 parties had an appointment. In the future, disciples of Leigong Temple's line and Luopashan can communicate frequently with each other, asking questions about martial arts. As for Wang Fushuan, at first he planned to have a fist with the young hidden official, but he caught a glimpse of the one sitting at the table and holding the book in one hand. After thinking about it, let it go. Not in a hurry. Besides, if oneself bullies a young man who has not learned boxing for a few years by relying on his age, it is unreasonable that he will not win. Lu Kaishan from Iazhao took his wife and children to visit, and apart from anything else, he took out a lot of presents from the nearby objects and piled them up on the stone table. Not implicit enough. Will it look bad on face? What's so bad about money? And when they left, the richest couple in the world seemed to forget to take away that inconspicuous thing. Lu Yuzhou saw the young hidden official with a bright smile and called his name. Chen Pingon smiled and nodded, then stood up and folded his fists to thank the family 3 people. Chen Pingon said with a solemn expression, "Thanks to the Lu family for the Great Wall of Sword Qi, but there will be dispatches in the future. You only need to fly a sword and send a letter to Luopa Mountain." Chen Pingon must immediately hurry to Iazhao. An ape mansion on the upside-down mountain is the Great Wall of Sword Qi given by Liu's initiative. Not only that, but many hidden industries, money and things, were handed over to the Summer Palace. Lu Jubao stood up, smiled and replied with a fist and said, "The hidden official is serious, Lu will not act like this. Some things are not business. I only hope that when the hidden official passes by Ai Aizhou in the future, he must visit our home as a guest." Then Chen Pingan said something that surprised both the old scholar and Lu Jubao. Can the younger generation beg for an anonymous guest with Lu? Lu Jubao was stunned, without a word of nonsense, and laughed heartily. That's it. I glanced around at the little brother. Know the reason. On the Great Wall of Jinqi, there are two sword immortals from Aizhou, Li Ding and Zhang Xiao. Very disliked for his hometown, but in the end, he still died as the sword repairman of Ai Aizhou. Among the hundreds of families of the philosophers, many ancestors who can come are here. After all, they are different from the general big monks. They are regarded as hybrid officials, and they all need to look at the Confucian temple to act. The two ancestors of the military family were the first to visit. Old ancestor Jiang was standing next to Su Bai, looking at the woman in red in the distance. Mr. Fan, the ancestor of the merchant, was the last to visit and chat with Chen Ping'an. On the contrary, he talked more about the past than with the old scholar. Among them, he talked about the robe of Kaik Mansion in Luzhou, Beiju. Hearing Mr. Fan said he wanted to get a piece of the pie with a cheeky, Chen Pingan was of course very welcome and gave out 30%. I plan to spend 20% on my own, and then discuss with Sun Qing and Wu Yu in Kaik Mansion, and try to get 10%. The old scholar thinks that Mr. Fan deserves to be rich. The current patriarchs of the Sage Mansion, as well as the patriarchs of Aquarius Island Yunlin Jiang, also came to Gongdalin. In fact, the old talents originally planned to talk less, always annoying with their own reasoning, once or twice. Fortunately, talking too much is easy to annoying. But in the face of the descendants of the Saint Mansion, the old scholars couldn't hold back after all, and they murmured with them in their own hearts. Naturally, there were compliments, not a lot, well done, and stingy about what they did. He was also very polite, and cursed the two of them. As for whether they can listen or not, it doesn't matter if they can really listen. It just took 2 days to treat guests like this. At last there is a rare clean time, with towering old trees, and a pavilion underneath. The stone table in the pavilion is carved with a chessboard. Li Baoping played chess with his uncle Junqian. Left and right were watching Li Huai. The little spirit was sitting on a bench and reading. Master couldn't understand the game, but he knew all the words in the book. The old Shuozai took Chen Pingan for a walk outside the pavilion, and smiled. Welcoming and sending off is very troublesome, but don't be troublesome. It's full of knowledge. Keep your ears up and listen carefully to what others are saying. When I think about what is hidden in the other party's words, especially why the other party says a certain word, think more about it, it's learning. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "At the door, at your own door." The old scholar nodded. It seems superfluous to tell you this. Well, your wine shop has a very good business, and scholars can steal money from businessmen, and they can earn money. How can they be someone who is afraid of trouble? You're just a kid and you're not afraid of trouble. By the way, next time you open the door and go to Wutsai World, that small wine shop, don't close it. The business is good or bad, you can't close it. I didn't say a word. The child of the poor family was in charge of the house early. It may be the world and life, so that child and later teenager were afraid of trouble. Chen Pingan nodded, then smiled. I'm just the second shopkeeper, and the big shopkeeper is the girl Daizhang. Then I chatted with my husband about Daizhang and the Confucian gentleman. The old scholar listened attentively, and talked about this with great energy. After all, his own context is weird. If it weren't for this closed disciple to make a new look, then he would be a bachelor. Back in the pavilion, the old Shiozai turned around with both hands down, occasionally helping Jun Qian give pointers or two. Chen Pingan was sitting with the little monster. For some reason, this little guy who was his teacher and nephew seemed a little nervous. Hearing Lu Shilia's heartfelt talking from the left and right, he nodded and said, relying on Mr. S' presence, I am indeed never afraid of me. Chen Pingan said helplessly, Brother Junqian, it's inappropriate. Lu 16 smiled and said, I haven't filed a lawsuit with my husband. Chen Pingan turned his head and said, go on again. Uncle Master doesn't have a special meeting gift at hand for the time being, so I will fill it up later. Zheng Yugan lowered his head and waved his hands vigorously, no need. When I arrived at the Confucian temple, I was placed in a fairy house by the master before, and the noisy things were all rumors about this young master. The sword immortal in Qingshan will beat people at sight, fight fiercely, and have a bad temper. Little master's temper, conscientiously speaking, really looks like a firecracker. If you don't agree, you have to take a big basket full of firecrackers and stuff it on the head. Who can eat it? Chen Pingan smiled and said, fuck it again. Are you out there and heard some false rumors about the little uncle? After the little guy lowered his head, he didn't raise his head anymore, but he turned his head quickly and wiped off his sweat. At this moment, I heard the question from the little uncle, with an embarrassing smile on his face. Lying is definitely not good, but if you want to lie, don't you say it straight, scratching your head while wiping sweat. Smiled left and right, this uncle is very prestigious. The old scholar slapped his left and right heads, a true gentleman watching chess, no wonder you only have the title of a wise man. Look at Li Huai, how old he is a wise man. Li Huai was struck by lightning, only to feel that disaster came from the sky. What? The old scholar laughed and said, look at my memory, I forgot to tell you, Li Huai, you are a Confucian sage now. Don't worry, we are in the line of Wenxing, but it doesn't matter if we go through the back door, it's the Confucian temple. A few teachers, plus a few Shuigong Jizhou and Shurya, worked together to discuss the results. After 2 years of hard work, after 2 years, I will earn a gentleman. In the future, Uncle Zhuo will see you again. Why should I ask you? Li Huai was sweating with anxiety, scratching his head and saying, I can't. Nodding left and right, the child is very modest. As for the academic achievement level, as long as you have this mentality, you don't need to worry. Li Huai hurriedly said, Master, the Confucian temple can't be so foolish. Aquarius is not a sage yet, so why should I be? The old scholar smiled and said, you kid has done a lot. Li Huai blurted out, then I won't take credit, let the Confucian temple don't give me any sages, okay? Grandpa, please help me, or I will hide Gong Delin is not leaving here. The old Shiozai said with a surprised look, Li Huai, yes, young and very ambitious, are you planning to ask for a gentleman directly from the Confucian temple? No problem, that's what I thought from the beginning. Give a wise man, give a gentleman, I think it is. Li Huai was going crazy, subconsciously turned his head and looked at Chen Pingan, what to do? I read a book well, and what can I do for a wise man? I'm going back to Shania Academy, so I can't live my life in the saliva tank every day. Li Huai is not stupid, he is a big Aquarius, and there are only a few orthodox Confucian academies. Where can there be more sages? Chen Pingan smiled and said, what can I do? What else can I do? I've become a sage, and I can't push it away, so I hide and study hard. If I really want to worry about things, I will discuss with the Confucian temple and the academy to help. Remind Shania Academy, except for a few chief and deputy chiefs, don't spread the matter outside. give it back to the sage and take it back. The Confucian temple will not agree to it. It's a child's play. But it's not difficult to help you keep it secret in the academy. Li Huai thought for a while. It makes sense. Hey, I will not be a big fan and be laughed at. It seems that I can get a sage title for nothing. It is only on the side of the leader of Pei Qian, who shows off in private. Maybe I can be promoted if I am a small rudder owner who can't be beaten by thunder for many years. Up. It seems to be a good thing. Lu 16 smiled. It seems that this little junior is really good at dealing with trivial matters in people's hearts. Lu 16 glanced around. I don't bother to pay attention to this. If Qin Pingon can't solve this little thing, he will be a junior. And the little uncle who looks like someone else. It is a pity that Li Huai looked at Qin Pingon and did not become his brother-in-law. Qin Pingon guessed Li Huai's thoughts and cursed, "Go away." Jing Yuqian looked at his master pitifully and respected the younger uncle, but the younger uncle had a really bad temper. Sitting here by himself, he was frustrated and courageous. In the twilight that day, Qin Pingon was sitting alone on the steps, watching the wind blow the fallen leaves on the ground. Because of being alone, I feel confused. The world is like this. What do you want? What can you do? What do you do? Self-discipline, self-examination, self-seeking, freedom. Read more ancient books to open up your horizons, and less nosy to raise your spirits. Those life accidents are like a sudden and majestic rain. The strong have an umbrella in their hands and the weak have nothing. The strong go under an umbrella. It is good for a moment to shelter the world from wind and rain. Li Huai came here sneakily, sat next to Qin Pingon, and handed out 2 slightly wrinkled books, not thick. Qin Pingon opened it and found that it was full of problems recorded by Li Huai, big and small reading doubts and academic difficulties. Some are smeared off, more are kept. Li Huai was a little embarrassed, and whispered, "A lot of questions will be asked to friends and master."